The button with 3 bars on the bottom right corner leads to various pages with gathering information on them for events like the Non-Theism Center, QEW, Quaker Earth Care Witness, field trips, and more. It's all on there.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for washing your hands more. How do we know this? The soap has gotten low in most of the common bathrooms. So please continue to wash your hands, not just for yourself, but for others. And if you notice that the soap is low, go to the Access Resources table and let them know which bathroom it is.
Reminder that the first 3 rows of the south parking lot must remain empty and available for the guests of the Haverford College admissions office. Gathering vehicles may be parked in other areas, including the visitors and Lloyd parking lots. And a final reminder that all RVs and campers must be parked in Featherbed Lane. Thank you so much for collaborating with us in partnership with Haverford College.
There have been several more reported cases of COVID tests since yesterday. So an important reminder, again, if you're not feeling well, call the number you'll find on the app and on the map. A volunteer will bring you a test.
Please don't flag down Haverford employees for golf cart rides. That's an FGC thing. There's a phone number in the if you need a golf cart ride.
And if you are using the brand new hearing assistance app tonight, you will need to make sure you are connected to the Wi-Fi network called FGC Listen and not the one that's FGC Haverford. You can open the assistance app on your device and follow the instructions and let us know how it goes. We've heard some really great feedback about it.
And now it's our pleasure to welcome Petra Doan to the microphone to introduce tonight's speaker, Jonathan Kuttab.
Thank you, friends. It's such a pleasure to be here to look out on your beautiful faces. But I'm going to have to take just a moment and play school teacher. Those of you in the back, if you'd come forward, it's really nicer for our guest speakers to be able to see your faces rather than little blobs at the back. So if you are able, there are beautiful seats right here in the front, and it would be lovely to see your faces. Thank you. Friends, before I introduce our speaker, and after friends have settled, I'd like us to begin by holding in our thoughts and prayers the Palestinian people living under occupation in Gaza and the West Bank, as well as those Palestinians who have been displaced from their homes and are living in other countries. Let us also remember all those killed on and after October 7th in Israel, Gaza, of course, also the West Bank. I'd like us also to take them in that moment to hold in our prayers all of those people, including Israelis and Palestinians and Americans and others around the world who are actively working for peace and justice amidst the ongoing. Let's take just a moment and hold all these beloved people in our prayers. Thank you, friends. I have been sympathetic to the Israeli people since I read Elie Wiesel's depiction of the horrors of the Holocaust in his award-winning book, Night, as a student at Westtown School in the early 70s. The unimaginable trauma of this genocide, as well as the ongoing tragedy of earlier pogroms throughout Europe, has left an indelible impression upon me. But I am also deeply sympathetic to the need for justice for the Palestinian people. In 1969, I was blessed to visit in Gaza with a dear friend who was working for the AFSC kindergarten programs, also with UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. With this friend, we traveled throughout Israel, the West Bank, and there I saw some of the very earliest settlements appearing on West Bank hilltops, usually just a trailer here and there. Several years later, in my graduate program at Cornell University, I was blessed with friendships with 3 Palestinian graduate students who were from Bethlehem, Bet Jala, Jerusalem, and Hebron. When in the 1980s, several years later, I was doing my field work in Jordan, I crossed the Allenby Bridge, but the Hussein Bridge, the Allenby Bridge, depends which side of the bridge you live on, several times, and had the chance to visit with those precious friends in their homes. And with their help, I saw more clearly the tremendous difficulties imposed upon them by living under occupation. I also saw in Jordan many refugees and displaced persons, and they shared their difficulties about the Palestinians living in diaspora. In March of 2023, 2 other friends, Jonathan Evans and Melissa Graff Evans, invited me and my wife, Liz Camphausen-Doan, to accompany them on a study tour of Palestine and Israel, co-led by Jim and Deb Fine. This powerful experience of meeting more Palestinians and more Israelis working for peace in the region reignited my desire to work, to contribute to this vitally important work. When Liz and I were asked to serve on the evening programs subcommittee of the 2024 Gathering Committee by my dear friend John Skinner, we realized this was an opportunity to find ways to share some of these concerns that were rising within us with you, the wider gathering, through the opportunity of bringing a guest speaker. I am so pleased to introduce to you tonight, some of you don't need an introduction, to Jonathan Kuttab, a Christian Palestinian attorney, an internationally respected human rights activist. Jonathan is one of the co-founders of Al-Haq, the award-winning Palestinian Human Rights organization. This group has done amazing work advocating for human rights in Palestine and documenting many injustices. If you don't know Al-Haq, look them up, A-L-H-A-Q. Jonathan also helped Mubarak Awad to found Nonviolence International that provides books, training materials, and other support to peacemakers worldwide. And the executive director of Nonviolence International is our own Michael Beer, who's manning the table in the back. So blessings upon this work as well. Jonathan is currently serving as the executive director of the Friends of Sabeel, North America, fosna.org. In addition, Jonathan is a member of the Bar Association in Palestine, Israel, and New York. He practices law in all three of these locations. Jonathan has worked with Palestinians who are wrongly imprisoned, who have seen their homes demolished by bulldozers, who have had their olive trees seized to make way for Israeli settlements. Despite the violence and terrible injustice he has witnessed, he remains committed to unrelenting, peaceful activism. I recently read Jonathan's short book titled Beyond the Two-State Solution, which is for sale on the side of the room over here. I can't recommend it enough. I was deeply moved by his ability to envision a future for Palestine and Israel that accommodates Israeli Jews and Palestinian Arabs in an inclusive democratic state predicated on the basic existential needs of these two parties. I taught urban planning for 33 years. This requires vision, and this book has a deep and powerful vision I recommend to you all. Many of the people we met with in March of 2023 recognized that the two-state solution is simply no longer possible. But Jonathan, in this book, has provided, and I hope tonight, provided deep insights into the parameters of a just and peaceful solution. He has also recently completed a memoir, The Truth Shall Set You Free, and that is also for sale on that table. I'm not flagging his books simply because I'm trying to sell his books, but because these books will touch your heart. These books will ignite your passion for justice. Please consider whether this might be right for you. So just a couple of housekeeping. Jonathan will speak out of the silence as he is led when I finish here. We're asking you to reserve your questions to the end. Jonathan will speak as he is led for 40 to 50 minutes, and then there should be ample time for questions. I will field the questions and we'll have mic runners who will bring the questions to you. We encourage you in your questions to be succinct and to ask a question and not make a position statement. And I'm also going to invite you all, if you have hearing challenges, to do as John suggested and log into the hearing assistance app. Thank you very much, friends. Let's move into worship, and Jonathan will speak out of the worship, out of the silence.
Good evening, friends. When I was asked to speak to this group, I was really thrilled because for me, the Quakers, the Friends, are a very, very special group, a small denomination that throughout its history has had a very powerful impact and has been a prophetic voice that was willing to challenge society at large and even take risks. even when they are berated, when they are accused of being unpatriotic, of being communist and communist sympathizers, of being contrarian to whatever prevailing injustice happened. From the times of slavery, they were leaders in the abolitionist movement. And they've been leaders also in pioneering for prison reforms. And I remember in my college days when they shocked the United States by actually sending a ship of medicines to Vietnam, who were the sworn enemy of the American public. And they were not deterred by the fact that many people accused them of being sellouts, unpatriotic, naive, because they had a very clear prophetic message that they were willing to stand by, even though their numbers were few. On Palestine as well, I remember from the very beginning that they had a powerful witness. When I was still in my teens, when the '67 war broke out, they were among the first to recognize the need for a just solution and to dare to talk about a Palestinian state and talk about the two-state solution and call out settlements as being illegal, contrary to international law, and that need to be stopped. They were willing to talk about the need to engage the PLO, which was considered a terrorist organization at the time, and they were willing to even risk breaking the law to talk to the PLO and to bring it into the political process. So when the events of October 7 occurred, it was only natural that I expected the Friends and the Quakers to be on the forefront of pioneers of addressing this crisis. And the reason that I thought that this crisis needed to be addressed are many, and if you'll allow me, I will bring them to your attention in a brief way. First, because this was a crisis where our own country, the United States, was directly participating, not just complicit in the evil that was taking place, but was itself providing massive amounts of support, mostly ammunition and weapons, but also diplomatic cover, vetoes at the United States, at the United Nations, coverage for what the rest of the world saw as an evil that was taking place in real time. And the fact that it was an evil genocide taking place in real time was the second reason why it called for a response. When the Holocaust took place against Jews in Germany, most of it took place in the dark. Nobody knew it was taking place, at least claimed. Even Germans claimed they didn't know it was happening until after the war. In this case, this genocide was taking place in real time, was being videographed, was being broadcast in real time on a daily basis. So there was no excuse of we didn't know, we weren't sure. There are different ways of looking at it. This was a clear genocide taking place. Not only that, but those who were perpetuating it were very clear and open about their intentions. They said, we are cutting off all water, all food, or electricity. We are dealing with human animals and we'll treat them as such. We will not be bound by any restrictions. They must be destroyed. They must be utterly destroyed. There are no innocents there in Gaza. And these statements were not just made by some radio broadcasters. They were made by everybody from the top, from the president of the state to the prime minister, to the defense minister, to the chief of staff, to everybody who was talking about the need to totally crush, destroy, obliterate Gaza and its people. Third reason, the massive amount of destruction, the bombs that were dropped on this small, tiny area, 22 miles long and between 5 and 8 miles wide, home to 2.3 million people, half of whom are children. The amount of bombs that were being dropped were several times the number of tons of bombs that were dropped during all of World War II. The massive destruction of hospitals, of all the universities and all the schools, of the bakeries, the plowing fields, the sources of living, the bakeries, the houses of worship, the infrastructure entirely. The level of destruction was massive. And the fact that orders were made to people, millions of people, to move out of their houses again and again and again, where there was no safe place to hide and where they were being bombed continuously, the level of destruction was such that it absolutely called for a response. But there's another reason, and that is the crisis that was taking place. And that was taking place on both sides of the border. That was taking place not only for Palestinian society that was torn asunder, but also for Israeli society that was also living its own crisis, an existential crisis, a feeling that they cannot live anymore, that they are threatened to their very existence. Now, with such massive calls for people of conscience to step up, again, the question arose in my mind long before I knew I was going to be addressing this group, is where is the church in this crisis? Basically, there have been two calls that were made rather timidly. The first is, let's have a ceasefire. Let's stop shooting. Now, it's absolutely essential. Obviously, if people are at each other's throats, the first thing you do is stop the fighting. That doesn't really address the injustices involved. That is the equivalent of saying, get your knee off my neck. I am actually dying. Stop it. Get your knee off my neck. And the second is allow food, allow water, and don't starve the people. And that, again, if I can give a US analogy, it's, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Let me breathe. Let me eat. Let me drink, please. Then we can talk about all the other issues that need to be addressed, and they do need to be addressed. Issues of justice, issues of equality, issues of fairness, issues of reconciliation, issues of peace, issues of coexistence. All of these need to be addressed absolutely. But at least let's start with a ceasefire. Why is it that something as basic as that, a ceasefire, provision of what's being called humanitarian aid, which is basically lifting the siege, that would be controversial, that would be problematic, that would require a lot of thinking, a lot of consideration, a lot of movement, a lot of lobbying to do? Really? I'll tell you why. It's because on October 7, a certain narrative was made and was sold to the American people, which continues to prevail today and which is not being challenged by the church or by the activists. Let me be very clear. The narrative says that Israel was attacked unprovoked in a barbaric fashion by this evil force called Hamas. And that Hamas is so evil that it needs to be destroyed, not negotiated with, not defeated, not brought about, not included in the discussion. It needs to be destroyed. Not its fighters, not its military power, but its entirety. Anybody and anything that's connected with it is so evil that it needs to be destroyed, and anybody who tries to slow us or stop us from utterly and completely destroying it are evil people. They are anti-Semitic. They have no right to speak. Anybody who fails to condemn Hamas, not just what it did on October 7, but Hamas itself, not only its fighters and its military power, but its entire governmental structure. And in fact, it is so evil that if we can claim without any evidence that they are somehow hiding among the civilian population, then it's perfectly legitimate. In fact, it is necessary to destroy that civilian population, to destroy those hospitals, to destroy those universities, those mosques, anywhere where we think or can claim that Hamas or Hamas affiliated or Hamas sympathizers are located is legitimate to destroy them. And if they are hiding under the ground, it's legitimate to order 1 million people out of their homes so that we can utterly destroy their homes. Every guerrilla movement, as far as I know, swims in a sea of civilians. But nobody has ever said that therefore I can destroy civilians completely and utterly, and that is legitimate. This is the narrative, my friends, that nobody is challenging. Now, I want to make it clear. I am no apologist for Hamas. But I don't think that they are so evil that they need to be utterly destroyed any more than the Likud party needs to be destroyed. Or for that matter, MAGA and the Republicans. Can you imagine if I were to say MAGA and anybody connected with it needs to be utterly destroyed, killed, annihilated? Impossible. We need to engage with them. We need maybe to persuade them to change. Maybe we need to bring them to the negotiating table. Maybe we need to ask them to change their charter, which, by the way, they did. Hamas changed their charter. Maybe we need to tell them to find new ways to work for their liberation rather than armed resistance. But to go back to my question, why is it that the church was so silent to this day? And pardon me, friends, why is it that the Quakers have not been at the forefront and pioneering the kind of changes that are necessary to bring some measure of justice to this situation? Have we become so complacent? Have we bought into the narrative? Have we ourselves failed to speak to Hamas, to speak to Gaza and Gazans, to take their considerations into our hearts? Now, the narrative goes that everything started on October 7th. You all know otherwise. You all know that Gaza has been under a terrible siege for 15, 16 years before October. That the United Nations was telling you this place is going to become uninhabitable by 2020. That these people are living in a big open-air prison. Nobody can go in and out. They depend entirely on Israel, which has them in a chokehold before October 7th. You all knew also that in the West Bank, the settlers have been running amok. That in Israel itself, the move towards right-wing fascism has been accelerating so much that among Israelis, they were worried that their democracy for Jews, you understand, is on its way out. They have a crisis. All this was before October 7 even started. And on October 7, and I really hate to say this because I don't believe in glorifying military power at all, but on October 7, what Hamas did was first and foremost a military operation destroying in 40 different places the wall that was surrounding them, capturing a number of Israeli military bases, killing, God forgive me, 340 Israeli soldiers and capturing about 40 or 50 others to take them to trade for the many, many thousands of Palestinians who were in Israeli jails, all of which was legitimate self-defense. But they also committed the crimes, the war crimes of attacking civilians in their homes, attacking a music festival. Now, why would somebody hold a music festival within a mile of a concentration camp? Never mind. Attacking a music festival and attacking Israeli civilian encampments was itself a war crime and should have stopped, and there was no justification at all for taking Palestinian civilians as hostages. And I've said that from day one, just as there is no excuse whatsoever for cutting off water and food from anybody, regardless of what they did and regardless of who else is hiding with them. But since October 7th, the level of attacks, the level of venom the level of vengeance that has been wreaked upon the Palestinian people has been tremendous. Now, you say, what do we do? What do we do about this? What can Quakers do? Quakers who know more than any other group of American religious people, except perhaps the Jewish communities, who know the facts on the ground, who know all about the occupation, who know all about the settlements, who know all about how the Nakba happened, 1948, who know all about the refugees and who have worked with Palestinian refugees. Do you have a message? Do you have any word to say? And I would like to propose to you that Quakers, as Quakers, have at least 3 important messages to give, and that they should be at the forefront of bringing that message to the people in the area. First message is you must confront the demonization of Hamas. And you must say, Israel, America, churches, you need to start talking to Hamas. You don't have to agree with them. You don't have to support what they're doing. You must initiate dialogue right away with Hamas. You must bring them into the picture. You must tell them what they need to do to be brought to the negotiating tables. You must make demands upon them, but you must also totally refute the demonization of Hamas. I know that's difficult. I know that may be even illegal. I know that that harps back to the bad old days when it was illegal to talk to the PLO because they were a terrorist organization. I know that that will create problems for you with the established Jewish community, and I'll get to the Jewish community later. I know that that means running against the current. But isn't that what a prophetic position is? You need to make peace with your enemies, not with your friends. You need to bring them into the picture rather than keep them outside, because the demonization of Hamas is the only excuse today for continuing this bloody war and this bloody genocide and this bloody killing and destruction of Palestinian society. Talk to Hamas, number one. Number two, this is the time to preach nonviolence. This is the time to tell both sides, Palestinians and Israelis, that violence does not work. Now, I know you've been telling Palestinians for many, many years, and I've joined you. Like you, I've been telling Palestinians nonviolence is the path, violence doesn't work. Yes, you have the right to armed resistance, but it gets you nowhere. You must try to look for nonviolent methods of working. Have any of you given that message to Israel and to Israelis? That violence doesn't work? That you don't need more weapons and more ammunition and 2 more aircraft carriers and massive more amounts of bombs, 2,500-pound bombs to drop on civilians who don't even have bomb shelters, who are living in tents? If they had, and somebody said, why didn't they build bomb shelters? Well, if they had bomb shelters, they've been ordered to leave, to move out of them. several times over. Can you use this as a teaching moment to tell Israelis, look, military power will never get you security. 8 months after the most massive bombardment of a totally tied down, encircled, besieged population has failed. Hamas fighters are still today fighting and killing Israeli soldiers. Doesn't give me any pleasure. But that's happening today. Israelis have not gotten back their hostages, civilian or military, and they are getting no security. Isn't that a wonderful time to tell them, look, you guys, violence doesn't work. You don't need more weapons. And we as the United States shouldn't be giving you any more weapons. Let's hear that message from the Quakers. Violence doesn't work. There's a third message that the Quakers need to give, and that is justice. You need to work on justice. You cannot seek your national goals by throwing justice to the wind, by saying we don't believe in international law, we don't believe in the ICJ or the ICC, we don't believe in any of the standards of the world. We want to do it by force and force alone. Isn't this the time for you to tell Palestinians and Israelis alike, let's look for a solution. Let's look for a solution based on justice, not based on balance of powers and forces like the Oslo Agreement was. I participated in the Oslo Agreement because I was hoping it would bring us closer to a two-state solution, until it was totally undermined. That's when I wrote my little booklet, Beyond the Two-State Solution. Thank you. It's available. You can download it for free or you can buy a copy. In fact, it has a nice little executive summary in the back. If you don't have the patience to read the whole thing, you can read 8 pages. Basically, it's my way of saying, how can we move out of the paradigm? How can we move into a new direction? Because Zionism, in as much as it tries to create a Jewish state, as Jewish as France is French, and Palestinian nationalism, in as much as it says Palestine Arabiya, Palestine is Arab, and all these people are coming from all over the world to take our homes, they don't belong here. These two ideologies are incompatible, and they cannot destroy the other. Today in Palestine, you have 7 million Jews living and 7 million Palestinian Arabs. And I'm not trying to say that there is any symmetry between them at all, but I'm saying they must find a way to live together based not on dominating the other, crushing the other, delegitimizing the other, but on the basis of equality. It can be done. There is a way it can be done, and it can be compatible. It can be made compatible with security. We can address what I call the demographic demon, this idea that 51% have the right to crush and totally ignore the rights of the other, which cannot happen. It's possible to imagine a single state which addresses all the needs of Israeli Jews and all the needs of Palestinian Arabs, except for the need of exclusivity and domination and control over the other. That it will allow you to live your life as fully as you wish, but also allow the other to live their lives. Shouldn't the Quakers be talking about such a solution? You don't have to accept my solution, but you have to start talking again about solutions that preserve the dignity and the human rights and the equality of both sides rather than allow domination by one side over the other. And fourth, and maybe last, is a recognition of what is happening in the Jewish community, both in Israel, but especially in this country. In Israel, the Jewish community is in an existential crisis. It is in a state of trepidation, of foreboding, of collapse, of internal fighting, of loss of faith in their government, in their army, in their security services, in their ability to even survive. In this country, the Jewish community is also in a state of crisis, and it's a moral and an ethical crisis. They cannot possibly tolerate or agree with or be complicit with what they see the state of Israel is doing every day. At the same time, they are worried, genuinely worried about manifestations of anti-Jewishness and anti-Jewish anti-Semitism in this country. And they don't know what to do. They really don't have faith in this society's willingness to protect them. They don't have faith in the courts in this country. They don't have faith in the institutions of this country, so they turn to power to force their way on politicians, to force their way on universities, to force their way on churches, corporations, states, to pass legislation ostensibly to fight anti-Semitism, but really to silence the discussion. And I'm not talking about the entire Jewish community, absolutely not. There are very strong voices within the Jewish community in this country that are not just supporters, they are allies. And they are people who are working for justice, not because they like Palestinians, but because they are Jewish and they believe in Jewish values and ethics. And they believe in justice, and they believe in equality. And they no longer believe that the state of Israel provides justice, equality, or democracy, certainly not to non-Jews living within its borders, whether they are citizens or merely being ruled by it or merely being captive to it, as in the case of Gaza. So they have a crisis. And they need to hear from their friends. And what they need to hear is not, hey, everything is okay. You're doing fine. We will support you. We stand with Israel. That's not the friends they need. They need the friends who will tell them, guys, you are driving drunk. I want to take the keys from you. Guys, you are destroying yourself and you are destroying the state of Israel. By supporting you in violating the rights of the Palestinians, we are doing you no favors. By supporting, giving you more weapons, we are doing you no favors. By punishing those who work against you, those who work for Palestinian rights, we are doing you no favors. By silencing the debate and the discussion, we are doing you no favors. By pushing the leaders of the Christian church in this country to avoid any BDS, any use of the word apartheid, any use of the word genocide, because they are not helpful, because they undermine our solidarity. We are feeling vulnerable, and therefore you must stand with us. Yes, you are feeling vulnerable. I understand that. But that does not mean that we need to support you when you're doing the wrong thing. We need to stand with you. We need to assure you of our willingness to stand with you against Christian nationalism, against crazy right-wing fascists who pretend to support Israel, but who hate Jews. And you know what I mean. You've seen them. You've heard them. In Christian churches, among evangelicals, those who support Israel 100%, but who don't really like Jews and who think Jews are going to hell and should be punished by God. This is not the help and the support they need. We need to start a new conversation between the Christian church and the Jewish community in this country. Maybe initially it has to take place quietly, not in public. And maybe we have to set the rules for this discussion, how it takes place, but it needs to take place because this community, the Jewish community in this country, is in crisis today, in spiritual and moral crisis, and they need your help. Now, maybe presumptuous for me as a Palestinian after all, to tell you what Quakers should and should not be doing. But in a very real way, what we see today is that the Palestinian cause has become a litmus test for everybody. Somehow or another, the Palestinian people will survive. We will survive. We're stubborn. The question is, will international institutions survive? Will international law survive when it's applied to everybody else but not applied to us? Will the ideas of human rights and solidarity, the ideas of rejecting racism and rejecting discrimination, will these values and principles survive if we're willing to allow Israel to practice racism and discrimination? Will the moral authority of the Christian church survive? Will the witness of the church survive this crisis? To this day, the church is still looking back to its failure to address the evil of anti-Semitism, anti-Jewishness over the years, to its failure to address the genocide against Native Americans. I saw somebody today with a shirt talking about the boarding schools that even the Quakers were involved with. And it's proper that we should look back in repentance. But it's much more important that we look to what is happening today under our very noses, in our name and with our money and with our bombs and with our approval. Can we be silent today? I don't think so. Can the Friends regain their pioneering role again? Because I know Many Quakers as individuals and communities here and there have been participating in some good activities and have been marching and have been calling for a ceasefire and have been challenging their legislators. But I don't think it's enough. I would like to see the Friends again be the pioneers, take a prophetic position, be willing to buck the system, be willing to go against the current, be willing to challenge the narrative and say this narrative is false. This narrative is false and it's leading us nowhere. Violence is not the answer. You need to talk to Hamas. You need to work for a proper, just solution. You need a new, open reality, and you need a vision for Palestinian Arabs and Israeli Jews to live together. It sounds so utopian, so idealistic, so visionary, but precisely this is the point. This is what Quakers should be all about. Pointing the way, giving a witness to a different reality than the reality that the politicians follow. I know, I tell you about how terrible things are back home. In this country also, we see the dysfunction of the political system. When have we ever seen the two major parties come up with such dismal candidates for presidency? I've never seen it. Never. How can we possibly vote for one or the other? It's really horrible. And yet, this is where we are. And this is where a Christian witness becomes important. And a Christian witness doesn't depend on how many people you have supporting you, but it depends on your message. How true is your message? How authentic is it? How open it is to the feeling, to the hurt, to the suffering, to the dreams of those who are most vulnerable. And often that puts you in conflict with the powers that be. The prophet is never popular, never. And sometimes you have to take the licks. And sometimes you have to be willing, as have Quakers throughout their history, to be willing to be challenged, to be willing to be falsely accused. Remember in Matthew, I keep telling people, if they call you, say, what if they call me anti-Semitic? Well, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, blessed are you if they say all manner of evil things against you falsely for my name. Falsely means if their accusation is correct and you don't like Jews, you don't get the blessing. But if you are not anti-Semitic, if you are not hateful towards Jews, and you take positions and you are falsely accused, then you have a special blessing in store for you. This is the message that I have for you. I'm a Palestinian, so you have to take that into consideration. I'm also Christian. The majority of people fighting in Palestine today are either Jewish or Muslim. But I think we have a message for both parties. And it's a message that is sorely needed. It's a message of peace. It's a message of nonviolence. It's a message of human dignity and human rights. And it's a message of justice, which will ultimately lead to peace, a peace that is sorely needed and desired by everybody in that area.
Friends, Jonathan is willing to take questions. I know these chairs are not super comfortable, so if you need to get up and move or leave, feel free. But that was such a rousing presentation. I'm sure there are questions. And I will be there are mics here. I will try to recognize who should speak if you don't mind. I'd like to look over the room and make sure we have people speaking. Yes, this friend. Please repeat, use the microphone. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. That was amazing. Thanks for calling friends to find our prophetic voice. I'm going to tell a little story, but it's really connected to a question. I was first in Gaza in 2014, and in May, and in that summer, after the 51-day bombardment happened, and it was the first time I knew people who were being bombed, and I would wake up every day to find out if my friends were still alive. And it was a big awakening for me. And then in August, Mike Brown was murdered. And my friends in Gaza did solidarity posts about tear gas and about what was going on in Ferguson. And I put the two together and I said, oh, this is all colonialism. This is coming from the same root and chattel slavery. And it led me to reparations. And so that's what I've been working on since then. So my question is, you have a really prophetic vision, very prophetic vision of the one-state solution, which I think is also practical, just practical. And so my question is, there's a colleague of mine, David Ragland, said, reparations are the midpoint between truth and reconciliation. And I wonder what your sense of reparations as a pragmatic thing, along with the one-state solution, is for Palestinians.
In my particular vision for a solution, people will not be forced out of whatever homes they're in, whether they're settlers in Tel Aviv or in Haifa or in Gush Etzion. Instead, Palestinians will be given alternative houses or alternative land from the public land. It's not the most ideal solution, but there is an element of addressing the injustice and providing reparation while recognizing the reality of what is. Because to remove 700,000 settlers from the West Bank is impractical. And to think of all the Jews who are already living on Palestinian lands and in Palestinian homes, which they took in 48, is also unrealistic. But you can provide a way for those Jews to stay in their homes and on their lands, but provide reparations in the form of alternative housing, alternative land from public land to those who lost their property, whether it's in 48 or in 67.
A question for advice. I'm from Frederick Meeting in Maryland. I've been trying to engage in reaching out to our local rabbi in conversation. He feels from his heart that Israel is their promised land. And that is so deep within the psyche of his community. I'm asking for advice on how to address that in conversations with him.
Okay. In my book, I don't address the rights or wrongs. I acknowledge that Israeli Jews think the whole land is theirs. Whether they believe in God or not, they think God gave it to them. Or Lord Balfour, or the United Nations, or military power. They believe it's all theirs. But Palestinians also feel it is all theirs. So instead of saying, are you right and are you right and are you wrong and who is more right and who is more wrong, I say we need a new vision that incorporates both. You want to believe that God gave you this land, yes, but He didn't give it to you alone. He gave it to you, but He also gave it to the Palestinians. Can you live with that? And you Palestinians believe Palestine Arabiya, it's yours. Yes, it's true. But can you accept the fact that there's 7 million non-Arabs living here? And can you find a way to live with them? Because if you don't, you have to totally destroy the other side, to totally kill them out or erase them or throw them away. And we can't. We Palestinians know we can't. Hopefully the Israelis will realize after October 7 that they can't get rid of Palestinians either. So this is a wonderful moment for us to think of a new solution, not to reinforce the old ideologies, but to say, can your Zionism be tweaked to accept Arabs? And can our Palestinian nationalism be tweaked to accept all these Jews who are living here? I think it's possible. That's the vision that I have.
Six years ago was the last time I attended French General Conference. And I think Lucy Duncan played a big role in organizing a wonderful evening program where Palestinian and Israeli talked about the long history. And it seemed already obvious to me that the two-state solution was completely as dead as a doornail, even 6 years ago. And I asked, is the only way forward a one-state solution? And what I was told was, it might make sense to us, but no Israelis or no Palestinians want that. They want a two-state solution, if anything. So I know that we can't prescribe what Palestinians and Israelis are going to do with this land that they're stuck in together in. But can you describe for us who haven't yet read your book in a few words what you see as a vision of a possible future where there could be a one-state solution that maybe it will take a long time to build, but that people could actually live together in peace and justice?
Yeah, I think we already have a one-state solution. It's already there. There's only one state between the river and the sea today. The question is it a Jewish state where Arabs have no rights? Or is it a democratic state where Jews and Arabs have equal rights? And you're right that if we're waiting for those who are in power to give up power, we may have to wait a long time. The apartheid, the whites in South Africa didn't suddenly wake up and say, you know, it's a bad idea. Let's give equality. The slave holders in this country didn't one day wake up and say, you know what? Slavery is awful. Let's free these people. No, they're my property. They belong to me. I have to be forced, either by internal or external reasons, to give up slavery and to accept them as equals. Doesn't come easy. There has to be a struggle. So if we're waiting to convince those who are in power to give up their power, that might take a lot of pressure. But there are things we can do in the meanwhile. We can tell them this is wrong. We don't accept it. We're not going to subsidize it. We're not going to insulate you from international law if you practice genocide or apartheid. We're not going to welcome you into our community if you are prejudiced and if you are segregated and if you are discriminating and if you are racist. So there's going to be a cost if you continue in this path. This is what we have to do to work towards equality. No longer to work towards a one-state solution. We already have it. The question is to work towards genuine equality and genuine democracy.
Are there substantial numbers of both Jews and Palestinians who are willing to accept the one-state solution you describe?
No, you remind me of Napoleon, who said, "How many battalions does the Pope have?" No, we don't have many battalions, and Jesus didn't have many disciples either. About 12 who are scattered here and there. The question is not, do you have a majority in support of these things, but is this the right thing to work for? Is this the right message? You know, we get tempted so often to think in worldly terms. One of the things that Jesus did was preach, my kingdom is not of this world. It doesn't matter how many people support me. In fact, when a lot of people support me, I begin to worry if I'm on the right path or not. I have to speak the truth. And I have to present a vision which one day will rule the world. Not because I have a lot of people supporting me, but because a lot of people were willing to die and become martyrs in order to spread the faith as we Christians see it. So yeah, every time I get asked that question, I feel very uncomfortable. No, we don't have substantial majorities supporting the one-state solution. But I can tell you one thing, it's going to be easier for Palestinians than it is for Israelis to accept this solution. For many years, the PLO believed in a secular democratic state with equality for everybody. The problem is we were told, shh, don't you say that. If you say you believe in one state, we cannot talk to you. The most you can hope is two-state solution. If you're not willing to accept a two-state solution, we won't even talk to you. It was beaten out of us. For 40 years, we were told, don't you dare talk about a one state, because that means you don't accept a Jewish state. That means you are almost like Hitler, you want to kill all the Jews. That means you're not a proper dialogue partner. So Palestinians say, okay, we'll take a state in 22% of Palestine. But that was not given to us. That was undermined. That compromise was being annihilated. So yes, we want one state. And I think most Palestinians, if given a real choice, you see, let me say one other thing. When I was involved in the negotiations, and there was one time when it suddenly hit me. Why is it that we Palestinians want a state? What does a state give me? I don't want a state. I want freedom. I want control over my life. I want a passport, not so that I say, here it is, a Palestinian passport, but so that I can travel. If I have something that's called a Palestinian passport that is only valid when it is registered in Israel, and you're controlling the border, not allowing me to leave or come, what do I need that passport for? Yes, I need a parliament, a legislative, but if I select or elect somebody that you don't like and you put them in prison, what do I need a legislature for? I need an airport. Yes, I need an airport so I can fly. But if I'm not allowed to fly in and out, and I'm not allowed to bring in my cousin to visit me or to live with me, then why do I need an airport? So the idea that the Palestinian state is the goal of Palestinian nationalism is wrong. And the idea that a Jewish state should be the goal of Zionism may also need to be adjusted, tweaked, to accept, to incorporate, to allow for the other within your goal and within your dream.
So
I'm going to start as just a citizen, not a member of a monthly meeting. Can you hear me? Closer. Okay. I'll speak not as a member of a monthly meeting, but as a citizen. And you're not happy with either of the candidates for president. And I just want to talk about the poor performance of Joe Biden. I have to make a short public speech about 3 or 4 times a month. It's a 5-minute speech, but I need notes. I cannot, I need to be able to remind myself of what I want to talk about. So I think it's very cruel and unfair treatment that people in the debate were not allowed to have notes. And as a public speaker, I understand that. I just want to defend that. Difficult to speak publicly for an hour and a half without a few notes. Thank you. For myself.
Thank you, friend. If you would remember, please ask a question, not a position. Brian, and then there's a gentleman in the back.
Jonathan, thank you so much for your remarks and your sharing with us today and your prophetic vision. My name is Brian Blackmore. I'm the Director of Quaker Engagement at the American Friends Service Committee. Many of the commitments to the people of Palestine that you described at the beginning of your talk were done by our staff and our organization. One that was very important but not mentioned is that AFSC was commissioned by the United Nations to lead humanitarian work after the Nakba in 1948 and build the first refugee camps in Gaza. And we've had our staff there in the region ever since October 7th, distributing humanitarian aid. And AFSC also partnered with the largest national and international organizations to draft a statement during the week of October 7th. And then we reiterated this statement in partnership with one another during the month of April. These organizations include the Friends Council on National Legislation, Friends World Committee of Consultation, Quakers in Britain, Quakers in Australia, Quakers in Canada, Quaker Peace and Social Witness. I believe that we have drafted the message that you have encouraged us to put forward into the world, although it has not been endorsed by all of our yearly meetings and our congregations. Something very important in your message was that religious peoples are internally diverse, and something is going on in the Jewish community in the United States, that they are in crisis. And I think we are in crisis too in the liberal branch of the Religious Society of Friends as we try to find our footing and come to a sense of unity behind this message or not. So my question for you is, how much unity needs to be achieved amongst us before we start projecting this message even louder into the world? And what strategies might we use to project that message? Because we're a small religious community, so it actually makes a difference and has an impact.
Okay. If you're satisfied with what you've done, then I have nothing more to say. But if you think you need to do more to get your message out, then there are a lot of things that you can do. Some of them, like meeting with Hamas people, will be very shocking, but will be very important to start a conversation challenging the narrative and asking that Hamas be brought into the conversation. Secondly, opposing the massive sending of weapons to Israel, which should be an easy one for Quakers, because you're pacifists, you don't believe in weapons. But the massiveness of weapons being dropped now, I think calls for a much more massive response. And then the third thing is, it's a dilemma of every prophet, because the prophet doesn't have as many soldiers and followers and tanks and power as those who are in power. So sometimes you have to do some shocking things to bring attention to your message. Sometimes you have to predict horrible things so that people will be shocked into changing their behavior. Sometimes you have to accept that you're a voice crying in the wilderness. You've cried and cried and cried. They didn't listen to you, and you shake the dust off your feet and you move on because they have not listened to you. But I'm not sure that we've gone through all these steps yet. I'm not sure that we have really exhausted our ability to challenge the narrative, our ability to bring Hamas into the conversation, our ability to stop the weapons from going over there, our ability to defend international law and human rights and the International Court of Justice, and the idea that there is something called war crimes, that these are criminals that have to be arrested and put in jail for the crime of apartheid, for the crime of genocide, for war crimes that they are committing. I'm not sure that progressives or Quakers or any of us have already exhausted our means of making a prophetic statement and of letting our prophetic voice be heard. I know I've seen some young people. You know, Mennonites usually are not as politically active as Quakers, but Mennonite action groups have been doing marvelous things. They have been hounding politicians. They had 45 different legislators that were, they had a demonstration outside their offices, and they brought their hymn books along. Amazing, you know, the Mennonites sometimes. But it was the young people. It wasn't the leadership of the Mennonite church. Young people said, we have to do something. So how much more Quakers who have a long history and tradition of activism and of being pioneering and of being prophetic. And sometimes it doesn't happen when you first start. Abolition took you many, many years and took a lot of sacrifices and took, you know, an underground railway that was conducted and took courageous action until slavery was abolished. And in the end, it took a civil war to achieve it.
So there's a friend here, and then the friend who is standing, do you have a question? Yes? And then a friend there in the red shirt. And if we have time, Eileen, and then the friend behind, and a friend here. If at 1:45 we will break, and those whose questions have not been answered, we will invite you to come forward. But let's take these 3 questions and see how we go. If we're reaching the time when we want to release many of you, what we will do is invite some of you to come for another 20 or 25 minutes, but please come forward and we'll come down to this area. So there's lots more time for questions, friends. 1, 2, 3, and then let me check the time. So this gentleman.
Thank you, Jonathan, for your plenary. Right in my mouth. Can everybody hear me now? Okay. I'm Steve Locken. I'm clerk of Quaker Action, Mid-Atlantic region. And I wanted to ask, to what extent does the discovery of large reserves of methane gas, what we call natural gas sometimes, off the coastline of Gaza fuel this conflict? And given the increased value of that with the war in Ukraine, is that one of the motivations? And could this really be seen through the lens of extractive capitalism and colonialism?
Well, I'm sure the discovery of gas has whetted the appetite of many people. I'm also sure that those who make money out of selling weapons are very, very glad. You know, between the Ukraine and Gaza, you know, they're manufacturing and let the people die. It may well be they don't care about Israelis and they don't care about Palestinians either, as long as they are selling their weapons and profiting from it. Yes, your point is well taken. And it's one that I think a prophetic message that rejects violence and that rejects weapons and believes in human beings. We should be making the point that you are making. You're right.
It seems to me that there has never been a country that has benefited by having a state church. And that the only way that Israel can survive is if they give that up and become secular, which, to my understanding, most of the actual people in Israel are secular. I have heard this over and over again. I cannot say it that I know myself, but it seems to me that a state that tries to be a religious state cannot survive. So I ask you that question.
Yeah, I strongly believe in the separation of church and state. For a number of reasons, partly for religious reasons. Christ says, my kingdom is not of this world. I'm not a religious leader. He refused to be crowned as a king. Yes, certainly if we have a single state in Israel, Palestine, it has to be respectful of, but separate from any religious establishment. It should allow everybody the right to believe or not believe as they choose. The combination of religion and state power is very dangerous. It's especially dangerous in the Middle East where there are so many weapons. And it's a threat to everybody. And by that, I also include Hamas, which is using religion to fuel its desire for independence, for revenge, for so I have to be willing to say to Hamas also that no, we don't want an Islamic state either. We want a state for everybody, and you should be free to worship as you wish or not to worship. The problem is that there are people who use the religion to justify their political views, even if they're not religious themselves. And we see this among Zionists all the time, who are very secular. I don't believe in God, but I believe he gave us this land. Or Bibi Netanyahu is not religious at all, but who says, the Bible tells me how to deal with Gazans. Amalek, we should wipe them out. He's not religious, but he likes that verse that talks about genocide and that justifies killing the old, the young, the everybody, including animals. So we have to be very careful about those who use religion to justify ruling and oppressing other people.
Hello. Hi, Jonathan. This is Joe. Nice to see you again. Really. I have a two-part question. There are many so-called coexistence groups in Israel. These groups have Palestinians and Jews together doing peace work. You know these groups, I'm sure. Challenge is one of them. I'm wondering what you think about the currency or the value of these groups in terms of, grassroots kind of effect on the leadership in Israel, if there's anything to this in your opinion. And also, do you think that it's at all possible that the leadership in Israel, in the Knesset and the people who are in power now in particular, are ever going to be able to see a different way of managing the issues there that have been happening since 1948? Thank you.
Okay, the first part is a very, very tricky question because the Zionist movement has played the game of dialogue, has created what I call false dialogue, false peace groups that don't deal with the issues, but deal with the appearances. We bring 5 Jewish kids and 5 Arab kids, and they sing Kumbaya, one verse in Hebrew, one verse in Arabic, and they don't talk about land, they don't talk about settlements, they don't talk about equality, they don't talk about rights, they don't talk about the conflict. They just play the game of peace within the perimeters of the existing injustice. That's what's called normalization. They make the abnormal injustice normal and acceptable, and therefore give peace itself a bad name. So I believe that we should work very hard towards cooperation and maybe co-resistance rather than just coexistence. We join together to oppose injustice rather than we meet together and ignore the occurring injustice. The second part I didn't understand.
The other question has to do with the leadership in the Knesset and in Israel right now. Do you see any possibility that that's ever going to change the way they are approaching this issue? Whether they're
No, the leadership in Israel is definitely committed to continuing the injustices and the oppression and the war and the genocide. But that's only because they're allowed to do it. They're empowered to do it. They're enabled to do it. So they think it's fine. They can get away with it.
Thank you. I think my question is really a query for friends. I started noticing during the Q&A that we were turning the questions back on you instead of asking the question of how can we do what you asked us to do. And I want to notice that. I felt strongly the old Quaker query, what can thou say? But I think I want to reframe it a little bit. As someone who often serves as a marshal or peacekeeper at events in Philadelphia of all kinds, I've been sad not to see more Quakers in the streets. And the action that I went to where I saw the most Quakers was the one organized by AFSC. And there were some friends who left after hearing the chant from the river to the sea. Now, I don't particularly like that chant, as I think the purpose of the chant is to bring the group together. So if the chant's not doing that, it's not an effective chant, among other things. But I was really sad to see friends leave. And I thought, what in the world will we do if Trump is elected and we need coalitions where people can stand with people who they don't agree with about everything? So my query for us is, what can we say? How can we become sharper in saying what Quakers believe? And at the same time, be more generous in standing next to people who say things differently than us.
Yeah. Well, that's two separate issues. The first is from the river to the sea. When I use that term, I mean, I want justice to be from the river to the sea. I want justice for all the Palestinian people. I want justice for people in the Gaza, for people in the West Bank, and for people in the Galilee. Now, the other side tries to say from the river to the sea should be free of Jews. Nobody says that. Nobody says that. But for them, that becomes the excuse not to enter into a conversation. Limit yourself to the West Bank. Don't talk about from the river to the sea. Don't talk about Israeli Arabs. Don't talk about Jerusalem. Even don't talk about Gaza. It's a separate problem. Don't talk about the right of return. That's too problematic for us. Only talk about this. Talk about the West Bank and Gaza, maybe. No, I want to talk about all of Palestine. And I want all of Palestine to be free from prejudice, free from racism, free from domination by one group over the others. That's what I would use. The second part of your question is, how do we build coalitions? How do we talk together? Do we allow the other side to set the framework for us? Do we allow the other side to say, if you want to talk to Hamas, I don't want to talk to you? And many of them will say that. In fact, that's one reason why the PA for a long time would not unify with Gaza, because they were told by Israel and the US, if you talk to Hamas, you don't talk to us. So we have to accept fragmentation in order to play the game by their rules. No, we set our own rules and we don't allow the other side to set the definition for us.
Hi, my name is Suzanne. I'm a new Quaker. And my question isn't really for, I guess, the rest of the group, but like, how can one individual, right? Like, how can I, if me going to a protest wasn't enough, how can I do a better job? Because sometimes you don't have a whole group. So how can just one person make a difference?
How can one person work? You'll be surprised, but one person can pray. One person can pray. One person can be open to talk to another. Talk to somebody that you usually don't agree with. Talk to the local rabbi. Talk to the local imam. Talk to your school board. Talk to anybody. Talk to your neighbor. But pray. Pray about it. And yes, our power is in numbers. When we act together, we are much more powerful. But sometimes you're by yourself and you have to do whatever you can do.
Friends, I am told by our beloved co-clerk that parents need to be released to get their children from junior gathering. So anyone who still has a question, and I know there are hands that have not been reached, I invite you to come down front. Jonathan would be happy to stay for another 20 minutes and answer more questions. We can do it in a more intimate fashion. And so you are released, friends. If you would like to come join further discussion, please move forward. Don't forget to look at the books on the back table. And let's thank Jonathan for his amazing ministry and witness. No, I can't. I can't get down. Thank you. It's so good to see you. So good to see you. Thank you, Salvador. What can one person do? Do this. And have a friend invite you to join the committee. That was my gift. It was. Okay. He just hopped down. I was going to say you can totally get down. Yeah, I can't. I'm not hopping down. No, I'm not hopping. And
don't really want to carry this, but I don't know whether we might need it later.